Welcome to this month's edition of Shively Shoulders. We got a great guest and a wonderful program for you today. And across the table from me is my good friend and sometimes colleague, Mr. Pat Shoulders.
Good evening, Your Honor. As a co-guardian of truth and veracity here in the Tri-State, welcome to all of our viewers. Tonight we will draw the line. We will construct barriers to protect you from falsehood, innuendo, as we bore in on those issues that pertain to all of us.
It's very interesting. 2024 is a few months away.
Yes.
But you would think the election was right around the corner. I've never seen so much political activity, advertisements, state races, national races.
Local races. I'm watching the IU football game. First half, we hung in there against Ohio State. The defense didn't look back. And there is a commercial from not the Republican candidate for mayor, not the Democratic candidate for mayor, but the, is it Libertarian? Libertarian candidate for mayor in the city of Evansville, all of whom perhaps you will see in the future on Shively Shoulders.
We hope to have the candidates with us in October. It has to be October because after October it's going to be a little too late.
My question for you is, can the Republican Party nationally run on a crime, law and order platform when their nominee has 4 indictments pending?
Well, that's a good question, Patrick. Very good question. I think the Republican Party needs to take a really serious look at the so-called standard bearer, front runner at the top, and is that what we're all about?
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that. I think I thought Nikki Haley did well in the debate. I think there are some candidates who could take your party back to its true principles, sort of that Reagan era where the Republican Party stood for something other than Donald Trump, and perhaps make this a full and fair election.
What people have to understand, this is not a partisan perspective, it's political science perspective. Donald Trump is not a conservative. True conservatives.
No, he's a criminal and a joke.
He is a populist and not a conservative. Nikki Haley, you mentioned Nikki Haley.
Yes.
I was so impressed with her. She's the real deal. Then we got to talking about the deficit. And of course, Republicans want to blame it on the Democrats, et cetera. She said, no, we're all guilty. And we need to get real with our budget and with our spending. And that's a pretty bold statement to make.
And her numbers have bumped up. Speaking of good candidates of the female gender, we have our own Suzanne Crouch, who's proposed elimination of our state income tax.
I respect the Lieutenant Governor. I certainly hope she prevails in the primary and is the standard bearer for her party next year. However, income tax is a fair tax because you're taxed on what you earn. If you have a great year, you got to pay more in taxes. If you have a bad year, you pay less in taxes. Property tax is so regressive because regardless, ask any farmer, for example. If you have a bad year, that property tax is going to be the same, maybe increased based upon what the local government needs are. If you really want to make a difference in people's life and fair taxation, find a substitute for property taxes, but to simply say we're going to eliminate. Pat, can you tell me what the state income tax rate is?
About 0.39%, just around 4.
I mean, I'm sorry. It sounds good and everyone can rally behind it. But the impact will be negligible.
I think that's right. We have these bumper cropped surpluses. There are those of us that still believe that we could spend for the benefit of all, make our parks and our roads and our libraries nice places where all of us can enjoy. But your party has, well, your former party, your nonpartisan gig right now, has made it a dirty word to talk about tax increases. And so we now see who can propose the biggest cut. How about locally? The mayor's race is about to kick off. We have city council races.
It has kicked off.
It has kicked off. I mean, in earnest. We're post Labor Day now. We are going to have a theme here. Nikki Haley, Suzanne Crouch, and Evansville will perhaps, we have a third party candidate, but the two major parties have nominated a female, and the odds would be that we will have a female as our mayor.
Yes, the odds are pretty good that's going to be the result. And that's going to be a new chapter, a very welcome chapter in the history of this community.
When we come back, we will begin the dialogue with something else all of you know, and that is school is no longer out, it is in, and we have the superintendent of the Evansville-Vanderburgh School Corporation, Dr. David Smith.
And we're back, and we have this evening one of the really fine leader in this community, the head of the Evansville-Vanderburgh School Corporation, Dr. David Smith. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome, Dr. Smith. We have a tradition here with a new guest. We generally let them talk about themselves right out the outset. For our viewers, for the people that are watching the show, you're a school person from the day you graduated from college, right?
Well, I am, but before I do that, it is an honor to sit between two Harper Elementary grads, two Harrison High School grads, and two EVSC Hall of Fame individuals. So
Wow.
That's
I
pretty
think
special for me.
I think we can cut right now that the show's done, right?
Absolutely. This guy knows how to butter up the host.
No,
You see,
no.
he thinks that's going to save him from the hard questions that Les is going to ask, because it's certainly not going to come
Sure.
from me. Thank you for that. It's
Yeah.
nice of you to
Appreciate
say
that.
that. Tell
Very
us
nice.
about your background.
Well, I think it's pretty unique in terms of being a superintendent, because not only have I been an employee in our district for 42 years now, I was also a student in our schools. When Helfrich Park opened up, I was the inaugural class for kindergarten. So went all the way through Helfrich, all the way through Wrights. I taught for nearly 2 decades. Then I went into administration. Been blessed to be superintendent. This is my 13th year, but it doesn't stop there. My wife taught for us for 35 years. Both of my sons had phenomenal educations from EVSC, and they are doing exceedingly well. So it's been quite a journey for me.
So
in
you're
EVSC.
homegrown through and through.
Absolutely.
And your background was in band, music. Well, you were a principal and an assistant principal.
Right. I instrumental music teacher in high school for 17 years, a couple years in middle school, building level administrator for 5, downtown then ever since.
I remember when Morgan was at North in the band, I'd always run into Dr. Smith. Wasn't there in his official capacity as superintendent. He was there with his camera, videotaping the band performances. I thought that was great.
Before we get into the challenges and the various specific questions, I think it would help our viewers to know just how big this corporation is, just how big your job is in the business and the corporation that you run. Can
Sure.
you talk about that?
Well, we have about a $300 million budget, about 23,000 students that we are responsible for, all the way from pre-K up to our grade 12, including our Career and Tech Center. We travel 3/4 of the way around the equator each and every day in our buses. We're the largest transportation hub south of Indianapolis, largest food service south of Indianapolis. And that gives you just a little bit of sampling about our students. We have 3,400 employees. If you put our students and our staff together, I think we're about the 30th largest city in the state of Indiana.
Food service, you also dispense medication every day
Yes,
from the
we do.
pharmaceutical. You transport kids, and we haven't even started talking about reading, writing, and arithmetic yet.
That's right.
Wow. There's a lot of challenges out there facing public education, and we see it on the national and local news scene. One of the challenges has to do with libraries and suitable reading material for children. Do we really have that problem here in this community?
Well, Your Honor, it's interesting, and as you alluded to, the national rhetoric has come into, I think, Indiana, certainly in southern Indiana. But also, when you look at, I think the last Gallup poll was out September the 1st, 76% of parents are very satisfied with schools. 36% of the population is. So I think that national rhetoric is really a result of that, which is
Good point.
very damaging. And then there have been folks that have used that platform to talk about burning or banishing books, things like that. You know, we have a process, and if there is a book that is objectionable according to our process, then we will remove it, because we do want things to be certainly age appropriate for our students.
But The judge has gotten very specific here. I want to stay out here in the general category for just a minute. You know, Les's hero, Mitch Daniels, our governor, changed school funding dramatically. We used to worry about our property taxes going up because schools were primarily financed by property taxes, right?
Correct. Yeah.
That switched during Mitch's
Correct.
first term. Money's a problem. Money was a problem then, money's a problem now. But how, again for our viewers' education, how are you financed? What burden do our local taxpayers have for our schools?
Sure. Well, the vast majority of our funds come from the state of Indiana, which can be a blessing and a curse because, as you said, Governor Daniels did alter and change the funding formula, and then we hit the Great Recession in 2009. Not a great time to do that. I think one of the outcomes of that and a reliance upon state funding is Indiana, just until a few years ago, ranked 51st in inflation-adjusted wages for teachers. So when you get the bulk of your funding from a source, that can put you at risk of having financial stability. So you're right, now we have property taxes that amount to a much smaller, basically 25 to 30% of our budget. And property taxes, you alluded to it at the beginning of the show, can be somewhat of a regressive tax, but it also is a very stable tax. So school funding is always something that keeps me up at night because we need funds to carry out the public's wishes.
But I don't have to defend Governor Daniels. He can defend himself. He'll have no problem defending himself against Mr. Shoulders. But the Governor Daniels' emphasis, regardless of the timing, was to make public education a number one priority for the state, and the state should take it as a responsibility across the board and not make it the responsibility of each local government. Is that basically?
No, I do understand that. And since that time, school vouchers have come in, so we're kind of funding 3 separate entities now, charters, public schools, and charters by and large are public schools, but then also private schools. But I applaud any state that wants to put education first and foremost because I think there are too many times and too many instances where governments fund the symptom and never address the root cause. If we have outstanding educational systems that are funded in the way they should be, then I think then you can avoid so many other societal ills. Because Pat and I have had this conversation many times when we think about race and race relations. Well, back in the 50s, it was thrust upon schools to try to solve that issue.
Right.
And that's just one of many examples. But
Every time there's a societal issue, the legislature passes anti-bullying, and they pass AIDS education, and now we want to ban books, and now we don't want to talk about gender and the anti-woke campaign. But in any event, if speaking of money, before we leave there, it's almost trite, but when we say, what's your biggest problem? What's the biggest challenge you have as superintendent? Is money in the answer?
I think it's part of the equation. So I'll go back to the original conversation in terms of the national rhetoric. But parents who have direct connection with schools overwhelmingly value schools and are very happy with schools. But you have that national discourse, then you have funding instability and lack of appropriate funding, and then that then creates a talent shortage. And that talent shortage isn't just for public schools.
Right.
Private schools, charter, everybody's experiencing that. You know, in Indiana last year had over 6,000 emergency permits. Those are teachers teaching in our classroom that have a bachelor's or master's degree, but not in education. So
What's the answer in terms of recruiting teachers and creating a pipeline for the future?
You know, I think we've put many things in place. We do have an incredibly competitive compensation package, but we also know that we have to grow our own.
Right.
So we're blessed with many innovative models. The newest one is the Academy for Future Educators that is housed at Rice with a great partnership at USI. So we are literally taking our students, putting them in that pipeline, giving them experiences. They will actually go into USI as a sophomore because of the opportunities that we are providing for them. And then the expectation is they come back and teach for us.
Right.
And you have, and it's different. When Les and I were at Harper and Harrison, he's been a year behind me, been stalking me my whole life, boss. I just want you to know that. But there was a sort of an industrial lane, there was like something called like a business lane, and then there was a college lane. We've come a long, long way, right? I mean, you now have kids going half day to school at Berry Plastics and being taught about business and making a wage in the afternoon.
Absolutely.
Talk about some of these programs you've got, where how education now has tried to keep up with the challenges we have.
Well, we're really blessed in this community. Taxpayers of Vanderbilt County built the Southern Indiana Career and Tech Center back in 2005, 2006. It is now one of the top 5 career and tech centers in the nation.
The nation.
The nation.
Underline nation.
Yeah. So nearly 1,000 students go there from 5 counties, including Vanderbilt County, and offer a wide variety of skills from cybersecurity, project lead the way, architecture, in addition to what we would consider our traditional vocational classes. But we also have a program called Opt-in, which is really making certain that all of our students before they graduate are aware of the tremendous opportunities that we have here in Evansville, and we hook them up with those opportunities. So we've got phenomenal partnerships. You mentioned Barry, also with AmeriQual. Ascension St. Vincent just provided $100,000 to our health scientists at the Career and Tech Center. So there are so many companies that invest in our students. Deaconess Hospital, we have grad pathways with them now for phlebotomy, surge tech, all of those things. If students want to explore the opportunities that they have, we have phenomenal partnerships. In addition to all of the partnerships we have with universities for your bachelor's degree and beyond.
During COVID, there was a period of time we were shut down. Kids were learning virtually, which has its limitations.
It does.
I will say I applaud the EVSC because they're one of the first school systems to come out of the lockdown and get children back in the classroom as quickly as possible. It still wasn't as quick as you would like. Have you been able to measure the impact on learning and skills of students because of that hiatus in their educational process?
Yes, we have, and I appreciate your comments up front because EVSC was the largest school district to be open in the 2021 school year in the entire Midwest, and perhaps the nation. We just stopped looking beyond that. But it is a truth that nationally, student progress was certainly interrupted during the pandemic, and the individual students that suffered the most were those that could least afford it. Typically, if you come from situations where there is some poverty in the house, you typically have less access to opportunities. And I think that when you look at marginalized students or populations, the impact of the pandemic was the most severe, and it's taking the longest for them to recover.
You know, you mentioned some of the curriculum things. I read an interesting article that there's a shift taking place, and I'd like to talk for just a second about the fact that 20 years ago or so, the new wave was high-stakes testing. No Child Left Behind, I-STEP in this state. Testing, it seemed like the whole curriculum was geared toward the test. Schools were measured based upon grades that students racked up in these kinds of tests. I have a sense that we've sort of backed away from that, or the state has. Where are we on all the high-stakes testing?
Well, first of all, I embrace accountability, and we should be accountable. And I take that responsibility, as do all of our teachers, very seriously. But when we talk about high-stakes testing, invariably, people will tell you that is not the best measurement, certainly not the best measurement of accountability for a school or a school district.
What is the best measurement?
Well, really measuring executive functioning skills, measuring whole child development. so to kind of answer both of those questions, we now know so much about how the brain functions and how the brain develops. We also know that.
Can you explain his to me? Oh, I'm sorry. I interrupted.
This is a 30-minute show? No. No, sorry about that. It would take much longer for
Right.
that. But executive functioning skills were not even mentioned 10, 15 years ago, but
Right.
now those are the essential neurological components that have to be in place before cognition can actually take place. High-stakes testing doesn't measure that. High-stakes testing is more aligned with the affluence of the family than it really is the efficacy of the school. But the reason why I think we had such a dependence on that was it was the fastest and cheapest, but certainly not the best.
And we don't have iStep anymore, right?
Well, it morphed into iLearn, so next year they're going to do a pilot where you have smaller chunks of the assessment in beginning of the year, middle of the year, and then you will have that final summative assessment. So it is changing. I do think that many people understood that almost the mantra, be careful what you ask for, because high stakes testing does not in and of itself indicate what kind of individual you will be, what kind of parent you will be, or what kind of employee you will be. Executive functioning skills, actually students' grades are the best indicator of future success.
You mentioned cognition and social emotional learning, and I know that EVSC is kind of at the forefront of some of that development. Talk a little bit about,
We are.
for all of us that are lay people, not professional educators, just exactly what it is you mean by all of that.
Well, we're blessed to have Susan Phelps, who's our Chief Neuroeducation Officer, and we've had great partnerships with Yale, with Harvard. And as an example, we, this year, for the first time as a pilot program, provided the MIMPS assessment, which is a Minnesota Executive Functioning Scale assessment for all of our kindergarten students. So we will know right out of the gate if they're on track with working memory, with focused attention, with self-control, and then we will be able to work with students that need that specific tailored support. So that's just one small example. Really, when we talk about neuroeducation, what we're talking about is making certain everything that we do aligns with how the brain functions and how the brain develops. Just one example of the challenges of high-stakes testing. When that came into place, many elementary schools pulled back on recess. Well, now there's a lot of research that shows that those unstructured play times are essential for developing executive functioning skill.
Let me put you, top of the show, you talked about Pat and I being Harper grads. And I remember back in the day, you have a PTA meeting, the evening. All the parents showed up. Parents were very involved. Very few kids came from what they used to call broken homes. That's not the case today. And my question is this: how is the EVSC, through its efforts, filling that gap? Because they need that, kids need that push from home as well. And what are they doing to get parents more involved?
Well, you're absolutely right. Parents are essential. And we cannot educate students successfully without parents. But there are lots of things now that we can utilize that we didn't have available perhaps when we were in school. So there is technology. Teachers have conversations with their parents all the time, email, text. It used to be you had to wait until you had that parent-teacher conference one time a year. Now we don't have to do that. So I think technology has helped. There also has been an abundance of competitive sports now and travel teams, so they're just two-parent homes, but also both parents are working. So it is more of a challenge, but parents, I've not run into a parent yet that doesn't want the best for their child.
We have, and how this time flies. We just got this bunny ears, means we've got 2 minutes left. Talk about, because I've heard you and you're inspirational, what is the state? Summarize, what are the state of our schools in Vanderburgh County, Indiana?
I think we have exceedingly strong schools. Some of the things that we've instituted recently, for example, in our high schools in the last 4 years, advanced placement enrollment, so classes for the most challenging, or enrollment for the most challenging classes have grown by 135%, but also performance credits in those AP classes has risen by 136%. We now have an early literacy specialist in every one of our elementary schools, not only working with students, but also working with our faculties to make certain everybody understands the 5 scientific principles of reading. We have a 54% increase in honors math enrollment in the middle grades.
Did you take honors math?
I barely got through 1 plus 1, 2 plus.
I'm with you on that. That's why we're here in the bullcrap department.
No,
Go ahead.
but I think what is emblematic of all the work of our great teachers and staffs is that we just had 4 high schools named to the U.S. News and World Report top 80 in the state of Indiana. So we have 80% of our traditional high schools in the top 18% in our state.
Let's think about that. There are 92 counties, and we've got 4 in the top 80. So some counties got zip.
Right. In fact, I think that has never been done before, that if you have a larger district, to have 80% of your traditional high schools on that very prestigious list.
Well, I wish we had more. We didn't even get to athletics, bands, and cheerleading.
Or what we're going to do with Eagle Valley.
Well, all of those things.
We have plans.
Thank you so much. School is in session.
When we come back, I'll take one more shot at Patrick. Patrick, that was like you said, not enough time.
Well, people ask, what's the matter with public education? It becomes politically great to get a few applause lines when you knock our public schools. The fact is, if you listen to that, there are so many great things happening in our public schools. All you need to do is take the time to investigate, and you've got to be pretty happy.
And everyone I've ever been associated with the school corporation, about my child or just general information, they're more than happy to sit down and explain things to you. It's a very, shall we say, transparent operation.
It is, and I don't know why our legislature keeps trying to find ways to divert money from our schools through vouchers and this and that and the other. You and I went to the public schools in Evansville, and here we sit. Now, people may say that's Exhibit A on what's the matter with public education. I get that.
It is a really tough situation. But I would just say this to people that watch this program. Judge public education based upon what you're observing in your own community, not what you see on Fox News, for example, from what you see happening in your own community, and we're blessed.
Well, and Dr. Smith is humble. The fact is, he didn't talk about the fact that we have, I don't remember the number, 60-70% of our students are on free and reduced lunch, come from homes that need help for buying lunch and buying books and this, that, and the other. Yet this corporation outscores every urban district in the state of Indiana with its accomplishments. So there's a lot of good news there, and I'm glad he had a chance to share it.
Exactly. Well, next month, we're on
month,
the heels of the municipal election, and we got some special programming. We'll tell you more about that later. Keep watching Channel 9 for details, but we're going to try to get all the candidates with Pat and I and get you prepared for election 2023.
see you in October. Les will dress for Halloween.